Hey everyone, this video is to help you with special right triangles. The first type that we have is a 45, 45, and 90 right triangle. So because it's 45, 45, 90, that means it's an isosceles triangle, because if two angles are the same, then two of the sides are going to be the same. So we don't know any of the sides. We do know that the two legs are congruent because it's isosceles, so I'm going to label each as x and x, and then the relationship is that the hypotenuse is always the leg times radical 2. So if the leg is x, that means the hypotenuse is x radical 2. It's going to be really important that you remember how to label these special right triangles. X, x, and x radical 2 are the sides in a 45, 45, 90. What we're going to come back to a little bit later is the easiest x value that you can work with is going to be 1. Obviously, you can't work with 0 or a negative number because you can't have side lengths of 0 or negative side lengths. So we work with our smallest number, number 1. So that would be 1, 1, and 1 radical 2, which in that case, we can actually just call it radical 2. So we're going to start by filling in a table for 45, 45, 90. Your picture is here for you again. Remember, it's x, x, and x radical 2. And then what I like to do is, when it says leg 1, leg 2, and hypotenuse, I like to fill those in. So each leg is x, and then the hypotenuse is x radical 2. So for the first one, if leg 1 is 6, that means x is 6, so leg 2 is 6, which means the hypotenuse is going to be 6 radical 2. For the second one, you're not given the legs. This time you're given the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse is 7 radical 2. If you look here, 7 radical 2, and then we have x radical 2, basically that's telling you that your x value is 7, which means leg 1 and leg 2 are both going to be 7. For number 3, we are given leg 2. It doesn't matter which leg you're given, they're always going to be the same. So if leg 2 is 5 radical 2, that means leg 1 is 5 radical 2. What makes this one a little bit trickier is we're not used to seeing the legs with radicals. Remember, our rule is it's the leg times radical 2, which means all I have to do in order to find the hypotenuse is take 5 radical 2 and multiply it by radical 2. Remember, you can multiply things that are inside radicals. So that's 5 radical 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So that's 5 times 2, or 10. Number 4 is probably the most difficult type of problem. Now I'm given the hypotenuse, which is x radical 2. So previously, when I was given the leg and trying to find the hypotenuse, I multiplied by radical 2. Well, if you're working backwards, you're going to divide by radical 2. Or the other way that you can think about this is you are given that x radical 2 equals 8. And then just solve for x. So I would divide by radical 2 on both sides. So that's going to give me that x equals 8 over radical 2. You should have a red flag because you can never leave a radical in the denominator. So we rationalize. We multiply by radical 2 over radical 2, which will give us 8 radical 2 over the square root of 4, which is 8 radical 2 over 2. And then I can divide the 8 and 2 because they don't have radicals. So that would be an answer of 4 radical 2. And then these can always be checked on calculators. Alright, so a couple more examples. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to label my sides. This is x, x, and x radical 2. You are given the leg in this one, so this side is 8, that means this other leg is 8. And then that's your x value, you just plug it in to find the hypotenuse, x radical 2. Next example, once again I'm labeling this as x, x, and x radical 2. This time you're given the hypotenuse, so this is one of these problems that asks you to work backwards. So instead of multiplying by radical 2, I am going to divide by radical 2. And right away you see that you need to rationalize. I multiply by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, which is 10 radical 2 over the square root of 4. 10 radical 2 over 2, which simplifies to 5 radical 2. And remember, your sides are congruent, so they're both 5 radical 2. For example 3, once again, I'm going to label x, and x radical 2. This is one of those problems, you're given the hypotenuse, you know you need to divide by radical 2 to find the legs. The radical 2's are going to cancel, which makes sense because if you look at this format, here are your radical 2's, x equals 9. So each side is going to be 9. And lastly, x, x, and x radical 2. You are given one leg is 3 radical 2, so the other leg is 3 radical 2. In order to find the hypotenuse, you multiply. You're going from a smaller side to a bigger side, which means you need to be multiplying. So I take 3 radical 2, and I multiply it by radical 2. Once again, you can multiply things with radicals. So this is 3 radical 4. Square root of 4 is 2, so I have 3 times 2, or a hypotenuse of 6.